we are going to finish this chapter that is about beginning of agriculture. Okay, beginning of agriculture. Yes. Okay, the beginning of agriculture. Let me see. This is the one. Okay. Okay. Hold on. Oh my God. So ya yo tengo. I got one. Ya cogí uno. Ya cogí uno. Ya. Es mi mamá que me está trayendo algo así. Okay, let me see. Let me show you something. Let's do this class a little bit different, okay? Because this information, I have the book. This book, I have a virtual book, so it's the same information, but I wanna share with you this information that we have over here. Okay, now let's pay attention to this and you follow.
Main idea. The first farmers learned to grow plants and raise animals in the New Stone Age. The first farmers. As you read, use the graphic organizer to take notes on the beginnings of agriculture. After the Middle Stone Age came a period of time that scientists call the Neolithic Era, or New Stone Age. It began as early as 10,000 years ago in Southwest Asia. In other places, this era began much later and lasted much longer than it did there. During the New Stone Age, people learned to polish stones to make tools like saws and drills. People also learned how to consistently make fire. Before, they could only use fire that had been started by natural causes such as lightning. But tools and fire weren't the only major changes that occurred during the Neolithic era. In fact, the biggest changes came in how people produced food. In the Neolithic era, humans developed new ways to make tools and control fire. Plants. After a warming trend brought an end to the ice ages, new plants began to grow in some areas. For example, wild barley and wheat plants started to spread throughout Southwest Asia. Over time, people came to depend on these wild plants for food. They began to settle where grains grew. People soon learned that they could plant seeds themselves to grow their own crops. Historians call the shift from food gathering to food producing the Neolithic Revolution. Most experts believe that this revolution, or change, first occurred in the societies of Southwest Asia.
Okay, now over here there is a question. And I want to ask you a question. No, this is not the one. Sorry. Let's continue with this.
Eventually, people learned to change plants to make them more useful through a process called domestication. They planted only the largest grains or the sweetest fruits. The domestication of plants led to the development of agriculture or farming. For the first time, people could produce their own food. This development changed human society forever. Early domestication.
Yes, now over here, I think, here. Here, there's a question, and they ask a question over here. Who can give me an answer? Let me check. It says over here, where was rice domesticated? In Southwest Asia, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, or Africa? Which one? Let me show you the picture over here. Where began the, growing rice? Over here it says rice, right? Rice. So this is north, south, east, and west. So it has to be East Asia. Hold on. Which one? This one? This one or this one?
No. First.
Which one?
First.
The third one.
First one.
Okay, let me see.
No.
You are correct. That's the answer. Excellent, excellent. Good job, guys. Okay, now let's move on. And let's... Okay, let me...
Document-based investigation. Historical source.
A domestication mystery. Almonds are a very popular snack today. but they were bitter and poisonous before humans domesticated them. Historians don't know how humans were able to transform a dangerous food into a safe, healthy one. Almonds provide a striking example of bitter seeds and their change under domestication. Most wild almond seeds contain an intensely bitter chemical called amygdalin, which, as was already mentioned, breaks down to yield the poison cyanide. A snack of wild almonds can kill a person foolish enough to ignore the warning of the bitter taste. Since the first stage in unconscious domestication involves gathering seeds to eat, how on earth did domestication of wild almonds ever reach that first stage?
Okay, now
Jared Diamond.
let's move
From-
to another chapter over here and let's continue this. Pay attention.
Main idea.
Farming changed societies and the way people lived. Farming changes societies. The Neolithic Revolution brought huge changes to people's lives. With survival more certain, people could focus on activities other than finding food. Domestication of plants and animals enabled people to use plant fibers to make cloth. The domestication of animals made it possible to use wool from goats and sheep and skins from horses for clothes. After the Neolithic Revolution, people used animals to help them farm the land. People also began to build permanent settlements. As they started raising crops and animals, they needed to stay in one place instead of continuing to travel in search of new food sources. Then, once people were able to control their own food production, the world's population grew. In some areas, farming communities developed into towns. Early economies. Two examples of Neolithic communities are Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey and Jericho near the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. These towns had traditional economies. In a traditional economy, people make economic decisions based on customs and beliefs passed down from generation to generation. These decisions may include which crops to plant and how they should be distributed.
Over here, this is an example of this. What is the name? Let me see the name of this. The first society. What is the name? Yeah, it's in Turkey. The village of Çatalhöyük. Çatalhöyük. Now, this is an example of that town, that city. Okay.
An early farming society. The village of Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey is one of the earliest farming villages discovered. Around 8,000 years ago, the village was home to about 5,000 to 6,000 people, living in more than 1,000 houses. Villagers farmed, hunted and fished, traded with distant lands, and worshipped gods in special shrines.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on over here. Mia Cardoso is here. Hold on. Let's see what else do we have here. Here. Let's continue with this.
In Neolithic communities like Çatalhöyük and Jericho, people used primitive tools and methods to grow, harvest, and hunt sources of food. They created large pits for storage of food. This meant that farmers could increase their productivity by harvesting large amounts of food and storing it after harvest. Having a surplus or an extra amount made trade possible, since farmers had a supply of food that others might want to purchase or gain through barter. A barter system is a form of exchange where goods and services are traded for other goods and services. The people who lived in Jericho, for example, traded items like salt and grain for turquoise gems from the Sinai region. Religious practices. As populations of towns grew, groups of people gathered to perform religious ceremonies. Some put up megaliths. Megaliths are used as monuments or as the sites for religious gatherings.
This is an
Stonehenge is a prehistoric site located in England that dates to 3000 to 1520 BC. Scientists, historians, and archaeologists have long disagreed about the exact purpose of Stonehenge. Some argue that it was a megalith that served as a monument to the dead, while others claim that it served a religious purpose. Yet others believe it helped ancient peoples predict astronomical changes, such as lunar eclipses. Early people probably believed in gods and goddesses associated with the four elements: air, water, fire, and earth, or with animals. For example, one early European group honored a thunder god, while another group worshipped bulls. Some scholars also believe that many prehistoric peoples prayed to their ancestors. People in some societies today still hold many of these same beliefs. Many communities and religions have practices and structures that guide what happens when a person dies. At Çatalhöyük, for example, flesh was removed from the body, and the bones were then bleached and buried in the floors of homes.
Okay, this is a video about the same talk that we just heard. Okay.
When in our evolution did we first realize that all must die, and that death might not be the end? The earliest clues are prehistoric. Tens of thousands of years ago, before we learned to farm or write, we buried our dead with ritual.
We don't know the very earliest earth burials, but there are certainly some earth burials that go back at least 40 or 44,000 years, and more recently archaeologists have found some that go back much beyond that.
Despite the enormous gulf of time, archaeologists have found clear signs of concerns much like our own.
They must have had a reverence and a respect for the dead, because fossilized remains of plants and leaves and moss remain in these graves, suggesting that they made some provision so that the graves would be comfortable.
Okay, this is the end of this video. That is what I wanted to farming changes. Yes, we wanted to show you. Let me see, we got something else. No, this is the review. Now, the same thing that you just heard is the same information I got over here and that I wanted to share with you, but I think it's better if you just watch what the book online has it. Okay, now it's the same thing, the same information that you just heard. And another information that I wanted to share with you was is this. Let me see if I'm able to show it to you. I have a video of this place, the megalith. Remember, they really don't know if they create this as a religious place where they have to make some religious ceremony, or they use it for other. Well, what's the purpose of this structure? Okay, now this is a video that I found over here, Megalith, England, from the air. Okay, let's watch it, guys. Remember, this is in England. This is stones over here. All of this is in England. Like a horse, you see. Okay, as you see, this is very interesting. Okay, until here, it finished the chapter about the beginning of agriculture. Okay, and this change, it was very important for the society in nowadays. Now, next week we're going to talk about the topic is going to be, and it's on page, let me see, on page 66. The geography of the Fertile Crescent. And as introduction of that class that is going to be next week, I want to show you this video. Let me see. This is the video. Let's watch it, okay?
The first civilizations began on a wide, flat plain between two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. These rivers flow from the mountains in present-day Turkey to the Persian Gulf. In ancient times, this area was called Mesopotamia. The name Mesopotamia comes from a Greek word that means land between the rivers. Mesopotamia is part of a larger region called the Fertile Crescent.
Alison, pay attention, Alison. Pay attention, please.
This land stretches from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. The Fertile Crescent is where the first farming communities were developed. According to many scholars, a group of people known as Sumerians migrated to Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. The land they settled in became known as Sumer. Mesopotamia offered the Sumerians fertile soil for farming, which made the area good for planting crops and developing a society. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers carried a fine, fertile soil called silt down from the surrounding mountains. Each year, the rivers flooded and then carried the silt across the Mesopotamian plain. When the flood waters receded, the silt settled into the soil and a layer of moist, rich earth was left behind for planting. However, there were also many challenges that the Sumerians faced. The floodwaters that brought the silt from the mountains also brought danger. Sometimes there would be heavy flooding and entire villages would be swept away. Another challenge the Sumerians faced was drought. The land beyond the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers was desert. During the summer, the ground was baked rock hard by the hot sun, and the lack of rain would cause plants to wither and die. Additionally, strong winds would blow from the mountains and whip up dust and sand that would form into gritty clouds that turned day into night. Despite the challenges the Sumerians faced, they were able to turn Mesopotamia into a productive farmland by developing two new agricultural techniques for growing food. The first technique was irrigation. The Sumerians dug many miles of irrigation canals to carry water from the rivers to their fields during the long, hot, dry summer months. Irrigation canals allowed them to plant crops far from the rivers. The other technique that the Sumerians developed was a new way of preparing the ground for planting by using the plow. Before the invention of the plow, Sumerians had to use digging sticks to poke holes in the ground and then drop seeds into the holes one by one. This technique was very hard, slow work. At first, the Sumerian farmers pushed the plow along the ground and dug long, shallow furrows or trenches in the ground. It was much easier to drop seeds into the furrow than into small holes. Later, the farmers began hitching oxen to the plows and having the animal pull the plow along. An oxen-powered plow could prepare much more land for planting than a farmer using a digging stick. As the agricultural techniques improved, the Sumerians were able to produce a food surplus. With a dependable food supply, the population began to increase, and villages that started as just a few mud huts grew into towns of neat mud brick houses. Around 3000 BC, the first cities emerged. Uruk was one of the first cities and had a population of about 40,000 people. Soon, other cities such as Ur, Lagash, Sippar, Nippur, and Babylon emerged and joined Uruk as the first Mesopotamian communities. As cities grew in size, they became...
Okay, we don't have enough time, guys. I just wanted to show you this information for today. Remember, we finished already the beginning of agriculture, and please try to complete the assignments. Remember, the assignment is on page 58, the questions 1A and B, 2A and B, and number 3. Okay, those are the questions that you need to answer, okay? Next week, we'll discuss it. I'll make sure that you did it. And then we'll begin the topic on page 66. In case you want to advance, you can start doing the vocabulary that is on page 66. You can do the vocabulary. Write the title. The title is Geography of the Fertile Crescent. Geography of the Fertile Crescent on page 66, and do the vocabulary. The key terms: fertile crescent, silt, civilization, irrigation, canals, surplus, and division of labor. Okay, you can do it. If during the weekend you can do it, so in this way we can advance. Okay, so next week this is the topic. Okay, guys, we don't have enough time. It's 8:29, and I have to leave, and you have to go to another class. So this is all for today.